everyone, my name is Tracey Hodges, and I am one of the cohort 7 fellows, which means I implemented my Learning in Action project this past spring 2020. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I did in my class, what my ELOs were, and how we managed the COVID-19 shift and all that came with it. So the course that I am going to talk about is CEE 478. It's called Teaching Language Arts in Elementary and Early Childhood. And this is a course for pre-service teachers who are those wanting to go into education and be elementary teachers. And the course is really focused on writing methods. And so I'll talk a little bit about what that means. So this was the overview of my project. What I really wanted to do was build my students' problem-solving skills as teachers, because when you're a teacher out in the field, much of what you do is problem-solving on a day-to-day and decision-making. And so I wanted them to be able to use research to plan lessons, to collect writing samples of student work, to analyze that work, and then to use research again based on the results of their students' work to adjust their lessons. And this is actually just the cycle of what good teachers do, is that they assess students, they use that assessment to plan their instruction, and then they assess again. So what I plan to do in order to achieve that goal was engage my students in research and analyzing data to develop lesson plans, and then for them to actually use those in class. Now, of course, part of that was disrupted by COVID, and so they didn't get the chance to do the implementation in the way that we thought, but I did make some adjustments that they were able to take and still do these ELOs. So my course is kind of interesting because it's a lot, but for this course, it is a W course for the college, which means that it is writing intensive. So students are expected to learn about writing and improve their own writing. But at the same time, the goal of the course is writing methods. And so they're expected to learn and integrate writing and reading into early childhood through elementary classrooms. And then they're also going to learn the theoretical and the practical knowledge behind teaching writing. So it has these kind of 3 interlocking goals. And what my job is to manage all of those. So teach them writing instruction, improve their writing, and teach them the theoretical and practical background knowledge. So here were the important outcomes that I hope to see based on those ELOs. That I had my students do weekly reflections where they integrated research they were learning, the course content, and their practicum experiences. Their practicum experiences were where they were placed in a grade kindergarten through 6th classroom for 3 days a week, and then they came to classes 2 days. So in those practicum experiences, they were going to be able to execute their lesson plans and also pull student writing samples and do some other like small assignments that I had for the class. And then in terms of assessment, the students practice learning about different kinds of assessment. The TAL-4, which is a standardized norm reference test, Words Their Way, which is just good evidence-based, and the 6+1 and WRITE rubrics, which are also evidence-based. And so they were going to apply all of these different assessments and use that to make instructional decisions. And then on their research side, what I wanted them to do was read, synthesize, and apply research in their reflections to research strategies and then apply that into their lesson plan. So they would research it, and then whatever strategies came up would be part of their lesson planning. And then I had them also create a parent and teacher resource to actually showcase their research skills in a different way. And this actually worked perfectly with COVID because it was digital and it was interactive. And then for assessment knowledge, I wanted them to learn about assessments, discuss them, and use them, apply those measures in their practicum, and then use those assessments to develop lesson plans. So again, the entire goal of this is that they are learning to use research as a first step to help their students be successful as teachers, and then to use that to modify. So the connections were the reflections. I was able to see growth and development of their thinking, and also see how they integrated research, their experiences, and the course content together. They created lesson plans, which they did two. One was pre-COVID and one was post-COVID. So that culminates in their problem solving and their ability to apply strategies. And then the parent and teacher resources was also, are they able to engage in authentic dialogue with stakeholders? So as a teacher, you'll work with other teachers, but you'll also work with parents. So can you communicate to them what good practices are and what might be best for their students? So what we were able to do despite COVID, we did read and review a lot of research. They were able to synthesize their research into digital infographics for teachers and parents, and they ended up creating video-based lessons that were shared in social media for teachers and parents who were transitioning to virtual and home-based learning. So they weren't able to teach their second lesson in the classroom with kids, pull data and bring that back as I had intended. So instead they created these videos that could be watched independently and supplement instruction if you're a teacher or parent. If you're a child, it would be a way to learn the content. And then we shared those in secured social media groups with real parents and teachers. So this is an example of the infographics the students created. So this student did, her strategy was multimedia writing, so using technology to write. And so the one on the left is for parents and what parents can do with this. And you can see there are little hyperlinks throughout and activities and extra resources. This is the synthesis of the research plus those extra digital tools. And then the one on the right is for teachers. And so this was the culmination of their research. And again, it was pre-planned, but it ended up being extra perfect for COVID. And then these are some, I'm going to show you two examples of student lesson plans. They implemented a strategy called Write Aloud, and this was a strategy that I taught for the first time this semester to the students. I am actually conducting my own research on this topic, but it's a process that demystifies what happens in the brain as you are writing, and so it's a way to help students, elementary students, learn how to write effectively. The students loved this strategy, that my undergrad students, and then they were able to apply this in these video lessons that they submitted. So I'm going to fast forward this one to where she actually shows the Write Aloud component.
No, because remember, I'm writing from the point of view of my cat, Rory. So after I write my greeting, I follow it by a comma. I am writing to you today to ask for more food. I know I already ate a lot of food, but would really appreciate it if the food you get me is really good, and I always eat it too fast. So remember how in the book we just read, the cows asked for something, and when they didn't get it, they kind of went on strike and they stopped doing what the farmer had asked of them. So I'm going to imagine that Rory would do the same thing. So I'm going to say,
So what I really like about what this student is doing, she's actually modeling for the students here how they would do this writing in a digital setting that works really well. And then she's stopping and narrating where she's getting her ideas from and how you can replicate it. So she read a book to the students as a mentor text, and then they were able to apply that. This entire framework is called the Writer's Workshop, which we also learned in class. And so it's really fun to see them apply this in a digital way. And these lessons, like I said, we made available to real teachers and parents to be able to use with their students.
Good morning.
So I have a second example that I will show. This student took a slightly different approach. You can see she still did the book and the reading, and then she used this whiteboard.
Small group, if I was in a small group, I could just show the pages back over, take a picture walk with my students. But if you do have a whole group setting, I would either pass the book around with the students or show it on a smart board, something along those lines. So I'm going to have my little sister help me out. So I'm going to give this to you. And we are going to go through all of the journalist questions. So let me write them down. Who, what, when, why, and how. Okay, first let's talk about the who. Who are the characters in this story?
There's a mouse, Gruffalo, snake, fox, and owl.
Good, and who would you say my main characters were?
The Gruffalo and the mouse.
Good. I might put 2 lines underneath them because they're really important to our story. So now that we've talked about who our characters are, let's talk about what was kind of happening in the story.
So basically in the story, everyone wanted to eat the mouse, but the mouse scared them all away.
Good.
So in this situation, again, the student is using that idea of the write aloud. She did the book reading, and now she's using a strategy called journalist questions, that if you were going to summarize the text, you would use these journalist questions to begin summarizing. And so I like that, again, we're seeing the ingenuity of the students during COVID and being able to use like the whiteboard in the book and her little sister who is handy. And again, these were what was shared so students would learn how to do this strategy if they were elementary age.
Hi.
And then here were some of my reflections from my students, that these were post reflections, so after the COVID kind of shut down. And so here was what one student had said about the learning experience. I believe the learning experience I just completed will impact how I approach the rest of my academic work at UA. I say this because I now understand that it's okay to be unfamiliar with aspects of teaching, and it is okay to reach out to others when you need assistance. I am going to take all the lessons I learned during the experience and use all the knowledge to help me grow as an educator. I believe that all the lessons I have learned, experiences I have had, and knowledge I have gained will continue to impact me as a person and teacher. And I liked this because this is the goal of what research is, that it's a way to reach out and get more answers if you don't know the answers for how to help a student. And that's exactly what I wanted my students to get out of this ELO, is that if they are working with a child who is having difficulties with writing or with reading, because I predominantly do literacy, then I want them to go to research and see how it can answer those questions, and then they can implement that in their own practice. And then another student said this, in CEE 478, we learned about write aloud strategies. In this case, I took what I knew from those lessons and tried to implement it using a computer. I would model how I wanted things done, talking through it so my students were able to explicitly hear and see my expectations for when they were able to work with the MacBooks on their own. I demonstrated this strategy twice. If I were faced with the same challenge today, I would choose the same strategy. So this is directly one of the big things that we talked about in the class, and they're showing how they would use it and how they would implement it even in these interesting virtual instruction times. So remaining challenges and questions, obviously we didn't get to do everything that I wanted in terms of the ELO. We did get to talk about the assessments, but we had to do it in a virtual setting. And so the students were not able to actually use those assessments with children as I had planned, but we are going to do that this fall. We're still kind of in virtual, but I am definitely letting my students engage with their K-12 students if they're in virtual or face-to-face settings and use these assessments. My biggest challenges are always that there's 3 interlocking goals for this course. The developing them as writers, as teachers of writing, and also knowing this theoretical and practical background. And actually with COVID, it's made me reflect on my course and cut a lot of things to what is really the nuts and bolts of what's most important. And I think that does make me hit these goals even more than I was before, which is nice. the kind of challenge I always face is the ongoing feedback to my students while they're out in the field. I have 25 students out in different classrooms across the city and county, so I can't be with every one of them for every lesson, but I can see some of them. Just ongoing opportunities to practice. I feel like these video lessons really gave them a chance to practice a lot in a way that they don't normally get. And of course, we faced unanticipated changes with COVID, but I think my students and I did a good job managing that. And like I said, from their comments, we were still able to accomplish the ELOs as expected for the course. And I'll be open to questions and discussion in our 1 hour session on the 23rd. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and I hope that you are enjoying your experience. And I look forward to, I'm actually implementing this again this fall in different situations to see if I have different results. So I will be happy to share those based on what I have when we meet. Thanks, guys.